After being reborn, I resolutely canceled my wedding with Ethan and submitted an application to study overseas. He brought Sophia home and I took the initiative to vacate the bedroom. He said that Sophia needed to stay at our home for a few days and I obediently prepared 3 meals a day. Anyway, I would fly to the other side of the ocean in 7 days. In my previous life, I married him, but I was just a seasoning for their love. Ethan used the excuse of gathering artistic inspiration to travel around the world with Sophia and see all the beautiful sceneries. As for me, I was just a tool for them to take care of the elderly and raise children. Even after my death, I had to undergo an autopsy and was labeled as a virgin to interpret their faithful love. In this life, I won't serve them anymore. When I received the list of overseas exchange and study sent by the hospital, I wept with joy. I was reborn. At the moment before the application for the exchange list was submitted, the director asked me strangely, "Didn't you say you were going to prepare for the wedding before? This overseas study will take 2 years. Is your fiancé willing to wait for you?" When Ethan was mentioned, my impression of him in my mind had already become blurred. I could vaguely remember that everyone praised him as a graceful gentleman with extraordinary bearing and also his and Sophia's much praised love that would last until death. Coming back to my senses from my memories, I looked at the director with a firm gaze. That just means that there's no predestined relationship between him and me. For me, being able to learn more medical knowledge and save more patients is what I pursue. The director looked at me with eyes full of admiration. I knew that the people sent by the hospital for overseas exchange and study this time were all talents deliberately cultivated. It would be no problem for them to be promoted to chief surgeons after returning to China. In my previous life, I gave up this opportunity for overseas study and exchange because my wedding with Ethan was just 10 days away. The Alexander family was a scholarly family. Ethan was a painter and I was just an adopted daughter of the Alexander family raised as Ethan's child bride since childhood. However, Ethan didn't like me. He only liked the passionate, open and unrestrained Sophia. But under the pressure from his parents, he had no choice but to marry me. On our wedding day, he told me that his health was damaged and he couldn't have sexual intercourse and he refused to share the same room with me. After that, he used the excuse of going out to gather artistic inspiration to travel around the world with Sophia. In the 3rd year after I married him, he came back with his and Sophia's son. He lied to me that it was an adopted son he took in during his travels and asked me to take good care of him. I stayed at home alone to serve our parents and raise the child. I watched helplessly as the child to whom I had devoted all my efforts and love went from being clingy and respectful to me to gradually alienating me. It wasn't until he grew up and insisted on studying abroad regardless of everything that I learned the whole truth. He was Ethan and Sophia's child and had already recognized his mother behind my back. After years of taking care of him, he didn't feel the slightest gratitude towards me. Instead, he thought that I was blocking his parents' love. In the end, I died of a heart attack alone in the empty home and no one noticed even when my body rotted. And just 1 month after I was buried, Ethan and Sophia held a grand wedding. At the wedding, Ethan was deeply affectionate and made a passionate confession to Sophia. After being separated for 30 years, we finally became husband and wife. It became a much-told story for a while. And I became the third party who obstructed their love, used the pressure from our parents to force Ethan to marry me. Even after my death, I was subjected to a body identification. The conclusion of being a virgin became a witness to their faithful love. I wasted my whole life on them and became a mediator for their love. However, now that I'm reborn, I won't repeat the same mistakes. There's still time to save everything. When I got home, for the first time, I didn't cook. Instead, I locked myself in the study to prepare for going abroad. Now that the quota for overseas exchange had been determined, I still had 1 week to prepare. I would officially set off for abroad in 1 week. I was so immersed in the joy of being able to start over that I didn't notice when Ethan came back. A week ago, Ethan surprisingly agreed to the marriage between him and me, so he obediently stayed at home to wait for the wedding 10 days later as arranged by his parents. Otherwise, in the past, who knew where he would take Sophia to play. "Amelia, you're back. Why didn't you cook? I'm still hungry." Ethan was heartless towards me, but I had indeed received the kindness from his parents. Since I had decided to stay away from him, for the sake of his parents, I wouldn't haggle with him over such trifles. As soon as I walked out of the study, I saw Sophia curiously looking around this room outside. Sophia was trained in dance and had a slender and graceful figure, with a carefree and unrestrained expression. I had seen countless portraits of her dancing in Ethan's studio. "Ethan, is this your bridal chamber? It's really decorated with care." She said this to Ethan, but her eyes were fixed on me. Ethan was instantly a bit flustered and hurriedly explained, "This isn't the bridal chamber I wanted." How could my bridal chamber be so petty? What Ethan said was the truth. This house was prepared for us by Ethan's parents, an ordinary 3-bedroom apartment, in order to let us cultivate our relationship together. Ethan had never asked about it, but under the pressure from his parents, he still moved in to live with me. However, he often didn't come home at night or went out for artistic inspiration or on business trips, and seldom stayed at home when he came back. He never regarded this place as home. And in his previous life when he married Sophia, he bought a detached villa as their bridal chamber and he designed and decorated every part of the house with care. Sophia curled the corners of her mouth in satisfaction when she heard Ethan's words. "It'll make Amelia feel so sad if you say that." I shook my head. In the past, I would indeed feel sad when I heard such words because I had expectations for him. I had been raised as his child bride since childhood, and the education I received was about how to be a qualified wife for Ethan in the future. So I was once willing to give and also expected that Ethan could accept me, and I had also fantasized about a life with only one person by my side forever. However, in this new life, I had long lost my expectations for Ethan. I have my own value of existence and don't live for others. Sophia's show-off words didn't hurt me at all. "Miss Sophia, you've misunderstood. I'm just staying here temporarily. This room will have its own mistress, but it won't be me." Ethan looked at me inquiringly, as if he had never expected that I would say such things. After all, in his eyes, I had always been the one who forced him to marry me by relying on my parents' partiality. Sophia, with a victorious posture, took Ethan's hand as if declaring her sovereignty quite naturally. "Ethan, didn't you say there was a surprise for me in your studio? Take me to have a look." Only then did Ethan come to his senses. He shifted his scrutinizing gaze away from me and with his eyes full of indulgence, he took Sophia to the studio. Before leaving, he didn't forget to tell me to finish cooking the meal quickly. Watching the backs of the two as they left, I thought to myself that I should go to Ethan's father and mother as soon as possible to make things clear and cancel my wedding with Ethan. After dinner was ready, I called them twice before the two reluctantly came out of the studio. Sophia's face was rosy and there were still some teardrops at the corners of her eyes. Obviously, she was deeply touched by the numerous paintings in Ethan's studio. I ignored the interaction between the two and ate my meal on my own. "Ethan, I don't like garlic sprouts." "Ethan, the taste of this fish is so strange." "Ethan, I'm used to having a glass of vegetable juice at night. Isn't there any?" Ethan glanced at me, who remained silent at the side. "Didn't you hear what Sophia said? Pay more attention when cooking in the future." I keenly caught what he said. In the future? I looked at Ethan in confusion. Ethan was completely calm. "There's something wrong with the water pipe at Sophia's house. She'll be staying here for a while." The broken water pipe was just an excuse. Surveillance was the real intention. In Sophia's eyes, Ethan and I were going to get married in 10 days. She couldn't let Ethan touch me, so she simply chose to live in our house. And because of my previous accommodation to him, Ethan took it for granted and got used to ordering me around. Thinking that I still had to endure the nagging of these two people for this week before going abroad, I just felt a headache. Before leaving, I didn't want other things to distract me, so I endured Sophia's provocation. After finishing eating and cleaning up, I tidied up the spare room in the house for Sophia to live in and then I went into the study. It was rather tight to arrange all the things within a week, including canceling the engagement, arranging matters for going abroad, and dealing with daily work. I stayed in the study until 11 o'clock. The day a week later on the calendar in front of me was marked with a big asterisk in red pen, and today was crossed out with a big cross. After getting up, I stretched myself, wanting to go back to my room to have a good rest. But when I walked to the door of my room, I heard moans coming from inside. I stopped in my tracks and confirmed that the sound came from my room. The people inside didn't even bother to conceal it at all, and the moans were getting louder and louder. I didn't mind their intimacy, but instead of being in Ethan's room or Sophia's room, it happened to be in my room, which was clearly meant to humiliate me. I suppressed the anger in my heart, calmed my breathing, and turned around to go to the room I had arranged for Sophia. Forget it. After all, this was just a place where I was staying temporarily. Why should I care? Just endure it. It would be over in a week. Early the next morning, as soon as I opened the door, I saw Sophia wandering around in the living room wearing a suspender nightgown, without any scruples. When she saw me, she greeted me enthusiastically, with an apologetic look on her face. Sorry. Ethan was afraid that I wouldn't be used to sleeping in a small bed. I couldn't refuse him, so I borrowed your room first. You won't be angry, will you? I shook my head to make myself sober up. What bad luck early in the morning. Sophia, you don't need to be so humble to her. This is my home, not hers. You don't need to care about her feelings. Ethan came out of my room with a cold face, looking at me full of displeasure. One might think that I had bullied Sophia. I took a long breath and turned around to go to the kitchen to prepare breakfast for myself, out of sight, out of mind. Out of politeness, I still prepared a breakfast for Ethan and Sophia. When I finished my own breakfast and was about to go out to the hospital, the two of them finally sat down at the dining table, all lovey-dovey. I'm allergic to mangoes. How could you prepare mango juice for me? Are you trying to kill me? Hearing Sophia's exclamation, I stopped my steps towards the door and couldn't help rolling my eyes. Amelia, come back. Where are you going? Didn't you hear what Sophia said? With your jealous look like this, how can you be a qualified wife for me? It's just that my parents were deceived by your appearance and were wholeheartedly partial to you. Ethan had always been dissatisfied with me. Because he was born into a scholarly family, the education he received since childhood was all a restraint for him. So he didn't like me, a child bride brought up according to his parents' expectations. Instead, he was more attracted to Sophia, who was open, free, and unrestrained. I had originally wanted to leave quietly, but these two people were really pushing it too far. I walked to the dining table with a cold face. Ethan was still chattering on. Go and make another one. Sophia is allergic to mangoes. What are you standing there for? Sophia looked at me with a smile, her eyes full of complacency. I directly dumped all the food on the dining table into the trash can. Eat if you want. If you don't want to, make it yourself. Who do you think you are? How am I supposed to know what you like to eat, what you don't like to eat, what you can eat, and what you can't eat? If you don't want to eat, then don't eat at all. Then I slammed the door and left in the shocked eyes of the two of them. Enough is enough. There's no need to endure any longer. The experiences in my previous life had already made me hold a grudge against these two people. It was just out of good upbringing that I didn't want to make it too ugly. I had originally wanted to leave gracefully, but they forced me. Well, then none of us would look good. After a busy day's work at the hospital, I specially took a day off, preparing to go and discuss with Ethan's father and mother about canceling the engagement tomorrow. When I got home in the evening, I thought Ethan would make trouble for me because of what happened in the morning. After all, from childhood to adulthood, I had never disobeyed him. But it was surprisingly quiet. I cooked dinner as usual. No matter what happened to the two of them, I still had to eat normally. Only today, I didn't call them and just ate silently at the dining table by myself. By the time Ethan smelled the aroma of the food and came out of his room, I had almost finished eating. Sophia sat down at the dining table reluctantly and was about to be picky as soon as she opened her mouth. Didn't I say that I don't like to eat? Ethan immediately picked up a chopstick of food and put it to her mouth, blocking what she was going to say next. I slapped my chopsticks on the table and stood up, ready to leave. Then I heard Sophia muttering, "I didn't say I wouldn't eat. What's the matter? Are you planning to flip the table again?" I gave her a cold glance, only to find that Ethan had been staring at me with a half smile all the time, which made me feel really uncomfortable. I ignored them and got up to go to the study. Sophia's complaints came from behind. "Ethan, look at her attitude. She's already giving you a cold shoulder before we're even married. What are you looking at? She bullied me like this and you didn't even care. You're still looking at her. Be honest. Have you fallen for her?" Then came Ethan's soft coaxing. I twitched the corners of my mouth. What a perfect match. While I was sorting out the books in the study, Ethan walked in at some point, with his arms crossed, leaning against the door. There was scrutiny, exploration, and interest in his eyes that I had never seen before when he looked at me. "I originally thought you were as dull and boring as other women. I didn't expect that you actually have quite a personality. I'm really looking forward to our married life." I rolled my eyes. There must be something wrong with this guy. When I was nice to him, he didn't show any good face. But when I turned against him, he came to fawn on me instead. I didn't stop what I was doing. These were all my most precious medical books and I would take them with me when I went abroad. "You're mistaken. We won't get married." Seeing that I said this without even looking up, Ethan sneered. "Didn't you use tricks to make my parents force me to come back and live with you? Do you think I'm willing? And now you're still pretending in front of me? If you please me now, maybe I can consider coming back to play with you for a couple of days after we get married." I slammed the book in my hand onto the desk. "Are you done talking? Can you leave now if you're done?" Unexpectedly, the interest in Ethan's eyes grew even stronger and he walked towards me step by step. "What's the point of sorting out these lifeless things? You'd better go back to rest early and build up your energy for our wedding. Tonight, you can go back to your own room to sleep. I promise that Sophia won't disturb you." Thinking about what they did in my room last night, I felt so disgusted that I almost threw up. "I think it's dirty." Ethan, however, seemed not to have heard what I said. He stretched out his hand, ready to drag me out. I slapped his hand that was grabbing my arm hard. Every pore of my body was resisting his touch. "What are you doing?" Sophia walked up angrily, pushed me away, and slapped Ethan on the face instead. "Didn't you say you came out to pour some water to drink? How come you're here? Do you regret what you promised me and want to go back on your word now? How could that be? I just thought you were wrong during the day, so I'm here to seek justice for you now. If you still don't believe me, I'll go and tell my parents right away that we won't get married and I'll marry you instead. Is that okay?" Sophia was immediately coaxed. She pretended to punch Ethan. "In your dreams. I won't marry you." The two of them were all lovey-dovey for quite a while as if there was no one else around before they left the study. Sophia had always boasted that she was an advanced thinking, independent woman in the new era. If she hadn't always refused to get married, Ethan indeed wouldn't have married me. No matter how much Ethan's father and mother liked me, their hearts were still biased towards their own son. As long as Ethan insisted, they wouldn't continue to oppose his marrying Sophia. The key point was that Sophia didn't want to marry. In Sophia's eyes, an independent woman shouldn't be bound by marriage and children. Marriage was just a piece of paper. As long as there was love between two people, it was enough. Children would delay her pursuit of self and enjoyment of life. So in the previous life, she threw the baby to me directly after giving birth and didn't take care of it for a few days. But in this life, Sophia was a bit different. It seemed that she had sensed Ethan's intentional or unintentional attention to me and she began to be swayed by anxiety. I shook my head to get rid of the thoughts in my head. What happened to them had nothing to do with me. In 6 days, I could leave. After drawing a big red cross on the calendar, I went back to my room to sleep contentedly. The next day, I got up very early and rushed to Ethan's father and mother's house. They liked peace and quiet, so the place where they lived was far away from the downtown area. When I arrived, the two of them were checking the wedding invitation guests with happy faces. At this time in the previous life, I was also beaming with joy while preparing for the wedding. But in this life, I came here to ask for the cancellation of the engagement. The two of them were very happy to see me and quickly greeted me to join them to see if there was anyone they had forgotten to invite. I walked to them silently and didn't participate in their discussion. Seeing my abnormality, Ethan's mother was the first to stop talking. She took my hand and asked me what was wrong and if Ethan had bullied me. After hearing my intention, the two elders fell silent. They were nice to me on the premise that I would be their daughter-in-law. In the previous life, after I married Ethan, Ethan never came home. They would still find opportunities to reprimand Ethan. But after Ethan brought the baby back, they never cared about Ethan again. They let him live a carefree life outside for decades, leaving me alone at home to serve my parents-in-law and raise the child. Only on their deathbeds did they say that I had suffered a lot and hoped that I could marry into a good family in my next life. Now that God had given me another chance, I just wanted to live for myself. I had already repaid the kindness I owed in the previous life. Seeing that I was so determined, Ethan's father sighed and didn't insist anymore. This matter is Ethan's fault. He's sorry to you. But anyway, you're our daughter. If you need anything in the future, just come to us. Don't bear it all by yourself. I nodded. They knew all about Ethan and Sophia's affairs. From the beginning to the end, I was the only one who had been kept in the dark. After this departure, if nothing unexpected happens, we will never meet again in this lifetime. I left all my savings to Ethan's father and mother, regarding it as repaying their kindness of raising me in this life, even though they didn't care about the money. After leaving the Alexander family, I felt completely relaxed. From then on, I was a free person and even the air seemed to carry the scent of freedom. However, the smile on my face disappeared as soon as I got home. The books that I had tidied up the night before were randomly thrown at the door of my house. When I walked into the study, the whole room was in a mess. Books and rubbish were scattered all over the floor, making it impossible to even take a step. Sophia was still sitting on my desk, looking disgusted. Looking at these messy things every day. It's so disgusting. My anger flared up immediately. I rushed forward, grabbed her by the hair, and threw her out of the study. Sophia kept screaming in pain. Ethan, who came running over after hearing the noise, frowned unhappily when he saw Sophia lying on the ground in a sorry state. Amelia, what are you doing? You've gone too far. Who gave you permission to touch the things in my study? Don't you know that these are all the fruits of my efforts? I've never gone to your studio. What right do you have to let her come and make a mess in my study? Unexpectedly, Ethan actually laughed. Amelia, what? Are you jealous? I almost wanted to smash his head. How could he still have the nerve to say such nonsense at this time? Ethan, I'm in so much pain. Sophia's weak voice rang out, and then Ethan remembered to help her up. Amelia, this is my home. What do you mean by your study? After we get married, even if I tear down this study, it's none of your business. Fuck your wedding, Ethan. Our wedding is cancelled. This was the first time that I had cursed without caring about my image. The feeling of depending on others was really suffocating. Ethan's words were harsh, but I couldn't refute them. After all, there was never a place for me in this house. I thought I could hold on here until I went abroad, but now I couldn't stay for another moment. I quickly packed my things. I was going to move out right away. I didn't want to see this pair of scumbags ever again. After coaxing Sophia back to her room to rest, Ethan came out and saw me packing. He sneered. Oh, still pretending? I admit that you've really caught my attention like this, but it'll be boring if you keep pretending. I advise you to stop while you're ahead. I couldn't understand what nonsense he was spouting. However, Ethan directly put the calendar with my marks in my study in front of me, with a smug look on his face. What? Did you think I wouldn't notice? You're so looking forward to marrying me that you can even say you'll cancel the wedding in a fit of pique. Who are you kidding? Only then did I realize that I had drawn a big star in red to mark the day I was going abroad, which also happened to be the day originally scheduled for Ethan and me to try on wedding dresses. No wonder Ethan thought that I was deliberately trying to get his attention and was looking forward to getting married. Go and see a doctor if you're sick. I snatched the calendar from his hand, tore it up, and threw it in his face. He didn't care at all and even had a smile on his face. I'll see how long you can keep pretending. I was too lazy to pay attention to him. I directly contacted a colleague who was also going abroad and we had a good relationship and discussed with her whether I could move to her place and stay for a few days. My colleague readily agreed, and I immediately made up my mind, packed my things quickly, and moved to my colleague's place. A feeling of getting out of the abyss emerged spontaneously. I felt much happier when I went to work at the hospital the next day. The next 2 days were uneventful. There were still 2 days left before I went abroad. As I was looking forward more and more to the exchange and study life abroad, Ethan showed up at the hospital. Amelia, you're serious about this, right? If my mother hadn't told us that the engagement was cancelled, were you going to keep it from me all the time? Ethan's questioning came out of nowhere. Shouldn't he be happy that the engagement was cancelled? After all, in the previous life, he hated me to the extreme because of this forced wedding. Ethan, isn't this exactly what you wanted? Besides, I told you before I left, but you didn't listen. Also, this is a hospital. Please don't interfere with my work. What's so important about this lousy job in the hospital? Can't our family support you? He said the same thing in the previous life, and I believed him. As a result, I became a housewife who was cheated on by her husband, betrayed by the child she raised herself, and achieved nothing. Your family can support whoever they want. It has nothing to do with me. Now, please leave. Ethan glared at me for a long time before he said hatefully, "Don't you regret it?" I thought that would be the end of it, but Ethan came to the hospital again the next day. I was going abroad tomorrow. The most important thing today was to check whether everything was ready before going abroad. Then I saw Ethan walking towards me through the crowd with a bouquet of flowers in his arms. Amelia, we grew up together since childhood. I don't believe you can just forget our feelings over so many years. Marry me. I really want to marry you. He also really wanted to cheat on me. I thought to myself. I didn't know what had gotten into Ethan that he was so persistent in wanting to marry me. Does Sophia know that you're proposing like this? A hint of embarrassment flashed across Ethan's face. I directly threw the bouquet in his arms into the trash can. Ethan, your trick is really cheesy. I tell you, I loathe you. No, I hate you. Don't let me see your disgusting face in front of me again. Ethan's face flushed red. Amelia, don't push your luck. Just wait and see. I would like to wait and see, but I'm going abroad tomorrow. If I'm lucky, we won't have any intersection in this lifetime. Just thinking about it made me laugh. Ethan felt humiliated and left angrily. The next day, I embarked on the flight abroad with an expectant and nervous heart. The days of overseas exchange and study were tough but fulfilling. I was exposed to many theories and practices that I had never encountered before. I buried myself in the hospital all day long and enjoyed it without getting tired. I grew up rapidly. Knowledge and work are the best remedies. As I was recognized more and more in my work, I became more and more confident. Visible changes took place in my whole temperament, and different suitors began to appear around me one after another. However, I rejected them all. Men would only slow down my progress. No man is worthy of making me give up my thriving career now. Amelia, that man has come to see you again. He always sneaks around furtively every time. I didn't stop my training. As a surgeon, my hands must be steady so that I can be quick, precise, and decisive on the operating table. I dare not miss any of these basic trainings for a single day. Just ignore him. He's just an irrelevant person. I knew the person outside was Ethan. During more than a year, he often showed up in a certain corner of the hospital, watching me silently. At first, I didn't notice it. He hid himself very well. It wasn't until later that one of my suitors discovered him and they had a fight. Unlike in China, abroad they advocate that only those who are capable have the qualification to pursue others. That time, Ethan was bruised all over, spat blood, and it took him a week to recover in the hospital. After that, when Ethan came to see me again, he gradually stopped hiding and showed up in the hospital openly. Even though he was provoked several times in the middle, he never backed down. Gradually, people realized that he was a tough nut to crack and stopped provoking him. Since he didn't say anything, I was too lazy to pay attention to him. But this time it was different. Although Ethan, as usual, just paid silent attention to me, he brought a tail along with him. Sophia rushed to me with a face full of jealousy and hatred. Her appearance was much harsher than when I saw her more than a year ago. I wondered why he always ran abroad during this more than a year. Sure enough, it's because of you, you bitch. Do you like stealing other people's men so much? Hearing such words now, I just sneered at them. She couldn't stand it when the same thing that she had done before happened to her now. It seemed that her previous carefree and unrestrained appearance was all fake. When she felt that she couldn't hold on to a man's heart, she went crazy more than anyone else. He has his own legs. What does it have to do with me? You're being too unreasonable. But you could have forbidden him to come here. I burst out laughing. She couldn't control her own man and expected me, an outsider, to help her control him. Miss, this is a hospital. We can't refuse a patient. Just like you came here, I couldn't stop you either, right? Sophia heard the sarcasm in my words. Her eyes turned red and her facial expression distorted. She rushed up, wanting to lay hands on me. I'll tear you apart, you bitch. Think it over. This is a hospital. Abroad, if you make trouble in the hospital, you'll be arrested. Sophia was still scared by these words. She glared at me resentfully. I won't let you off. It wasn't the first time I had heard such words. Instead of wasting your time making a scene here with me, you'd better work on Ethan. Goodbye. Sophia gnashed her teeth. Of course, I knew that if she could persuade Ethan, she wouldn't have come to me regardless of everything after finishing a day's work. I was ready to have a good rest in the evening and review today's operation carefully tomorrow. As soon as I arrived at the door of my house, I saw Ethan squatting in front of my door, drunk. I kicked him away in disgust. Blocking the door was really bad luck. When I opened the door and was about to enter, Ethan suddenly got up from the ground and hugged me around the waist from behind. Amelia, why don't you pay attention to me? I like you. I didn't know how much I liked you until you left. I've liked you since childhood. I just resisted having everything arranged since childhood. I know you liked me before too. Will you marry me? I struggled hard, but Ethan used too much strength and I couldn't break free no matter what. During the struggle, we moved to the living room. Ethan directly pinned me on the sofa. Is it only when you become mine that you will marry me? Then he started to tear my clothes. I suddenly opened my eyes wide. I didn't expect Ethan would do such a thing. No matter what I said, he seemed not to hear it. Seeing that my clothes were about to be torn off by Ethan, I struggled vigorously. My hand groped for the vase on the coffee table beside the sofa and smashed it on Ethan's head with all my strength. Immediately, blood gushed out and Ethan passed out. I quickly pushed him to the ground, tidied up my clothes, and kicked the person on the ground twice hatefully. What a brute! I originally wanted to throw Ethan out directly, but suddenly I thought of Sophia who showed up during the day. I fumbled to take out Ethan's mobile phone and sent a message to Sophia asking her to come and pick him up. Sure enough, soon Sophia appeared at home. Seeing Ethan lying on the ground with blood still flowing, she screamed and ran over. I covered my ears. Stop screaming. He's not dead yet. He tried to rape me. I was just protecting myself. Sophia widened her eyes and looked at Ethan on the ground in disbelief. I'll leave him to you. Don't show up in front of me again in the future. You can do that, right? Sophia nodded blankly. Instead of me doing something, it's better to let them fight each other. Evil will always be punished by evil. After that day, I never saw Ethan again. As soon as the 2-year overseas exchange and study program ended, I returned to China, was promoted directly to be a chief surgeon, and was transferred to the headquarters hospital, completely away from the place where I used to live. In just 10 years, I was promoted from an ordinary chief surgeon in the surgical department to a chief physician and became the youngest chief physician. The next time I heard news about Ethan was in the hospital. Ethan's father needed to have a brain tumor operation. Others were not confident that they could perform it successfully. While my hands were the steadiest, I had the richest experience, and the highest success rate of the operation. So they found me. When I saw the old acquaintance again, I still had mixed feelings in my heart. Ethan's mother almost knelt down in front of me. I know Ethan wronged you in the past, but for the sake of our past relationship, could you please save Alexander? I'm begging you. Even without mentioning that they had raised me, I'm a doctor now, and there's a human life in front of me. I would do my best no matter who the patient is. The operation was very successful. During Ethan's father's recovery in the ward, I went to visit him once. Ethan's mother was very emotional when she saw me. From her, I also heard news about Ethan. After Sophia took Ethan back to China that time, I don't know what method she used, but she actually got pregnant with Ethan's child. On the day of Ethan's father's 60th birthday, she announced the news in front of all the guests, forcing Ethan to marry her and take her home. However, Sophia was spoiled. She hated doing housework and refused to take care of her in-laws. Even after the child was born, she directly threw the child to Ethan's father and mother and didn't want to take care of the child at all. Ethan had quarreled with her many times, but she still went her own way. She even took all the money in the family into her own hands to prevent Ethan from cheating. Ethan had to report to her even when he wanted to buy a steamed bun on the roadside. Ethan's father and mother felt sorry for their son and secretly gave him some money from time to time. But after Sophia found out, she became even worse. She wouldn't give Ethan money for meals for several days and would even scold Ethan's father and mother for instigating Ethan to cheat. Unable to bear it, Ethan wanted to divorce her, but then she would cry, make a scene, and threaten to hang herself, saying that if Ethan divorced her, she would tell all the families that had friendly relations with the Alexander family that Ethan had abandoned her halfway and that the Alexander family was hypocritical and bullied her, a widow and her child. Helpless, Ethan could only endure it again and again. Hearing these words, I didn't feel anything in my heart. It was just karma. Ethan's mother kept crying and shouting that it was a sin and wondered how they could have such a daughter-in-law. She grasped my hand and looked at me expectantly. If the wedding hadn't been cancelled back then, what an excellent daughter-in-law I would have had. I smiled slightly, pulled my hand out and put it into the pocket in front of me. Every family has its own troubles. Everything will be okay in the future. This perfunctory comfort clearly showed my refusal. Ethan's mother also knew that it couldn't be undone, so she sighed a few times and let it go. As soon as I left the ward, I heard a trembling call from behind. Amelia. I turned around and saw Ethan appearing in front of the ward with tonics in his hand. His face was sallow, clearly showing that he had been suffering from malnutrition for a long time. The light in his eyes had disappeared and he looked listless. He didn't look like the charming and elegant artist he used to be at all. Amelia, I heard that it was you who saved Dad. Thank you so much this time. I just nodded. Ethan seemed a bit nervous. Amelia, I regret it. I really miss the days when you cooked for me at home. Those were the most delicious meals I've ever had in the world. I quickly took 2 steps back, took my hand out of my pocket and held it in front of me. Look clearly. These are hands for performing surgeries, not for doing housework. Ethan. I just didn't watch you for a few seconds and you came out to flirt with others again, right? Are you tired of living? Sophia's sharp and vicious voice came. Ethan's body trembled slightly and his eyes were full of disgust. Sophia walked up to me on her high heels. Her eyes flickered for a few seconds when she saw clearly that it was me. I looked at the woman who had made herself plump and fair-skinned in front of me, didn't say a word and turned around to leave. Sophia's scolding voice still came from behind. How dare you secretly meet your old lover behind my back? You'll go home and kneel on the washboard tonight and don't even think about having dinner. It was just karma. Amelia, there's a surgical plan that needs you to make a decision. I nodded, took the plan handed to me and threw myself back into work. I still have a bright future ahead of me,